All righty, Scott, the show is yours.
Hey, it's March 16th. Welcome to ISPI of Hampton Roads monthly chapter meeting. I'm Scott Wearsay. I'm the president of the chapter. If you're interested in serving on the board or serving with this chapter, please reach out to me and let me know. Announcement-wise, the International ISPI Conference is in Williamsburg at the end of April, March 24th through 27th. I'll be there. Mark will be there. Vance might be there. I can't remember if Vance is going to be there or not. I think Vance is going to be there.
Yes,
but
I am planning to be there.
All right. So yeah, if you're looking to get together in person, we'll look forward to seeing you all there. In May, we'll probably do a Cracker Barrel review, which was just everybody present the best sessions they went to. This is what I heard, and this is why it's important to you. We've done that in the past. We'll do that. And then in June, we have a presentation about AR and VR and how that's being used successfully. And that's from, now I'm blanking out on the name of the group, a company out of Michigan. Innovative Performance out of Michigan is doing that. And you'll see an email coming out for that in May for June. We won't send it out too soon for those kind of things. Other than that, I have no other announcements. I'll just hand it over to our speaker and let him lead away.
Very nice. All right, so let's go ahead and even though I think we all know each other to some degree, just for level setting, specific to tonight's topic, you can just like kind of go around the room. We are what you're working on now. I don't care where you're working, but what you're working on, and just roll out any membership associations that you might be a member of and are willing to share. So, Scott, you get to go first.
Let's see. I'm on the board for our property owner association. Does that count?
Sure does.
That's kind of you're a forced member. You can't like not be a member, otherwise we come after you. Let's see. I'm also a member of a golf association, the Riverfront Golf Association. We play on Saturday mornings. That we have one board meeting a year, so that's pretty easy one. And then I'm on this board, and then I serve on the marketing committee for my church, which I guess is a membership organization. Is a church a membership organization? Probably. We're trying to get involvement and action and trying to achieve goals. So I think that's the only. I'm on 4, so that's 4 is enough, as I would call it.
Yeah, it's just one shy of a handful. Mr. Lewis, sign in, please.
Good to see everybody. Bill, Scott, Mark, you guys haven't changed. So looking forward to the presentation. I'm not a card-carrying member of any organization. I do volunteer work for my church. Trying to start a organizational excellence position there actually, and been at Booz Allen for just over 8 years. Graduated from Bill's alma mater 2 years ago. Got an MS in Opal, and working with the professors there, have a community of practice at work that I lead the thought leadership pillar and like to have speakers. So if that's an opportunity, open to that. And that's it, I guess. I'm in Wilson, North Carolina too. I moved here last September from Norfolk. So
I hope it wasn't something I said.
no, never.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for that, and thanks for being with us. The nice thing about Zoom is that everybody's the same distance away, about 2.5 feet. So, excellent. Bill, tell us a little bit about yourself, like I don't know you.
Yeah. Good evening. It is great to see everybody here. And Chris, good job there with the Boise State thing there. We're both alumni. I think they may have some type of evening event during the conference up in Williamsburg. I don't know if you can get up there from Wilson or not, but just keep an eye out on that. Unfortunately, my day job is probably not going to let me get up for the conference itself. So as far as organizations, so this, the HR ISP or ISPI HR, since about 2005, after getting being made aware of it from Boise State University. And then we also, the HR Professional Development Association, I've been working with that with Mark for several years, getting ready to do a reinvention there. But just working with organizations to get things done is always you know, a great deal of satisfaction. So that's me.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. Vance, you are the penultimate speaker for this portion.
Yeah, right. Vance Kinsey. I work at Country Naval Shipyard in the Lean Six Sigma College. I'm a master black belt there. So my association is with ASQ. I've been associated with ISPI for just going on 20 years now, and past associations with SHRM, PMI, and ASTD or ATD, they call themselves now. I have actually divested myself of official membership in all of them, but but I still participate in several. Looking forward to being here and hearing what you have to say. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Vance. You probably couldn't tell, but I was nodding my head up and down knowingly to the blank screen that is representing you. All right. So those on the call right now know me. Those who are watching this later, you may not. So just a little background on me, and then we'll get rolling. I am Mark Bowers. I am technically retired, but it certainly doesn't look like it, except there's no paycheck coming in to speak of. I am, as Bill mentioned before, the founder and executive director of the Professional Development Consortium of Hampton Roads, which is indeed, we're kind of reshining the crystal ball this year. And other associations, of course, is a member of ISPI Hampton Roads, including a stint in the past as the president of the chapter. I also work, I'm also a member of ISPI writ large, and I'm a volunteer at the global level. Currently running the awards committee. Before that, ran the chapter partnership committee, which is actually providing me a ton of insight for what PDCHR does and what we're going to talk about tonight. Like Vance, I've been in and out of several other organizations in the area because they were interesting for a while or appropriate for a while, and also like Vance, I still plug in with them occasionally. Offer unneeded, unwanted, and unwarranted advice from time to time, and stay a little bit engaged with that. Just kind of taking that and talking a little bit of history. So whether or not that actually lends credibility to my talk tonight, it's up to you to decide. I've been associated, as it were, with membership associations on and off for like 40 odd years. I mean, kind of right out of the boat, student government at my undergraduate, up through, working, as I mentioned before, at a global level today. So it wasn't 40 years straight, but it's, a better part of those. I've been one way or another involved about half of the time in a leadership role, and out of those times in a leadership role, about half of those I was successful, and the other half I sucked horribly. The nice thing about the sucked horribly portion is gave me a lot of lessons learned that I can share and help drive the curriculum for PDCHR. So that's about me. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to start sharing my screen. And so what you're seeing right now is actually vacation photography. This is back when I was in the Navy, down in the Bahamas. If you're wondering if I'm screwing up here, the answer is no. I was in the submarine force. This is pretty much what it looks like at about 150 feet down. So that was fun. Let's move along. And look at me, I've already jumped ahead too far. There we go. We should start at the beginning. Okay, so PDCHR itself is an association designed to help those who lead membership associations lead smarter, not harder. It is a super tough job, I think, being in the leadership role. And people talk, it's terrible being, or it's a real challenge being in traditional nonprofit organizations that are, have a broad mission focus. I think helping run, membership associations is even harder because it's always after hours, fundamentally not resourced. There's not a ton of money. Very few membership associations, at least at the community level, have any, paid service like an executive director or access to professional talent. So they're all pretty much doing it, as they can, when they can. And one of the challenges is that folks in those leadership roles don't necessarily get there because they wanted to be there or that was a career goal. So that in itself offers, some interesting challenges. All right, so let's go ahead, keep rolling forward here. I invite everybody to just interrupt, unmute, jump in. You can use the chat if you want, but I'm not monitoring it. So hopefully Scott is, which reminds me, Scott, let me make you a co-host in case somebody drifts in. And so you can also, see the chat or something like that. But I don't expect, it's just us chickens here today. So just jump in if you got a question or observation, no worries whatsoever. And we'll finish precisely when we're done or before. So let's talk a little bit, I guess, about a definition for membership associations. So Scott, you actually opened the door to this question. You said, does this count? Does this church group count? So on and so forth. So a very, very loose definition is for a membership association is any group of people that gather reasonably frequently, whatever that is, and they gather around a common interest or a common practice. So, for example, civic leagues or homeowners associations. Oh, we live in these 2 blocks, or we live in this zip code. They may gather because they're interested in what what the city is planning on doing for or to them. Professional societies, which is certainly one common link you all have here. So we're interested in the particular practice of performance improvement or quality or what have you, training and education, so on and so forth. It could be they can be fraternal or sororal orders. They tend to show up because as folks who are providing service to their own community and through that to the larger community around them. Churches, absolutely, they gather around a common interest. This particular faith, this particular model for engaging with something higher than themselves. And they too suffer those same struggles when they put together committees and stuff like that. It's like, none of us are paid for this. Well, at least, not monetarily, maybe some spiritual payment for that. But face the same challenges of, not everybody here on the committee, it's not necessarily their job to think about church membership every single day or every single hour. So we're gathering those resources when we can and trying to be efficient and effective about it, which is why put together PDCHR is like, it's a tough job to volunteer and get voluntold for. Excuse me. Why don't we, help that particular community you're interested in serving? Why don't you help you serve them better? And if you do that, I think the community around you is served pretty well. So speaking of community, let's talk about what makes up your membership association. And there's a whole bunch of groups and subsets of people. And so the fact I've selected rocks for this image, none of you should take that personally. It was a nicer looking pyramid than any pyramids I saw. So around us is the community writ large. So think of this, and we'll just pick on Project Management Institute because I don't know that anybody's here to defend them. Well, maybe me, maybe Bill. But PMI, for example, there are a lot of people here in the Hampton Roads area that do project management, right? Whether they know it or not. Heck, by running an organization, and being the sole staff, I'm in effect a project manager, whether or not I choose to label myself as such. There's a whole bunch of people here in the Hampton Roads area that are doing project management. So they are to some degree, somehow, hopefully, interested in the practice of project management. Now, there's a subset of those people who are members of the Project Management Institute of Hampton Roads. And what does it take to become a member? Well, in professional societies, it usually consists of paying dues. It might be to a mothership organization, it might be to the chapter, it might be both. But to be a member is, kind of really writing a check. And some organizations, don't even do that. But the nice thing is now you've got a group of people who have made at least some commitment to the community, even if it's just themselves as a member, in terms of, I want to improve mine or our skills. Maybe this is an opportunity for socialization. Maybe it's an opportunity for network building. Maybe this is an opportunity for advocacy. Whatever it is that you go there for is part of that common interest or common practice. Now, out of the members, and we'll just keep picking on PMI, at last count, I think they had like about 1,200 members. So in that neighborhood, there's at least one comment involved. Out of those 1,200 people, they would probably, and I'm using some numbers back when I served on their board, they'd probably consider anywhere like 100, 120 or so as being engaged, and that measure for them is they show up at events, at least once during the year or once during their membership or something like that. And maybe they show up twice. I don't know what exactly it is, but you say, how many people usually show up for the dinner meetings, outside of the COVID period, of course. I'm going to say it's, 80, it's 100, it's, 120 or something like that. And so they say, all right, so we got these engaged members. So these are folks that we as the leaders, see on some frequent basis. We have an opportunity for direct, either on-site or online interaction with them. Get to, take their pulse, see what's of interest to them. And some of those we might even be able to turn into volunteers if we give them something to do that's meaningful and rewarding and within their capability and capacity. And out of those volunteers, eventually, we'll wind up with our volunteer leaders. So here's the people who are on the board or ascending to the board or like in that director level if they're not part of the board, committee chairs, so on and so forth. And so these rocks, not the people, but just the visual here, are deliberately in a pyramid. A, keeps them from falling over, so that's nice. But B, this is also how the pool looks like. So really, though, if you consider this is not photographed to scale. Community is like huge, right? There's thousands of people, millions of people, somewhere in between, right? Who are interested in project management. And then we said, out of all those people in Hampton Roads that are doing project management, whatever that number is, and that's a hard number to guess, only 1,200 are members, and out of those, only about 10% of them, 100 or so, are what we might call engaged. And out of those, we might have like, PMI Hampton Roads is pretty good. They've probably got like about 15 or so volunteers, and of which I think like 8 or 9 of them are designated as leaders by being on the board. So that's a pretty fat bottom pyramid that necks up pretty quickly, and that in itself kind of that's real, but it offers some challenges and some opportunities. Excuse me. So again, level setting. This is what a membership, the community around a membership association might look like. Next, I'd like to move us on to my favorite model. I actually came up with this, it's not unique, but it is to me. So I kind of started figuring this out when I was on the PMI board 10 or 11 years ago. So this, and if you think if you're curious why you're just looking at a circle, that's correct. That's where we're supposed to be. And so what we do here is I look at this as this can be a virtuous cycle model for how a membership association operates, or it could be a death spiral if we're not doing it quite right. So here are the components, and I talked about the 5 keys, in the invitation to join here, to join us this evening. And these are not necessarily the keys. You could call them that. I mean, that's one of the rules, of course, of presenting is like, oh, you have to have the 5 keys, the three secrets, the 2 things you should know, all that other stuff. So this is convenient. I knew that in this diagram we had 5 blocks that I think were important to talk about. So what we'll do is I'll give you a quick overview now, and then we'll step through each one in depth, and we'll do like at least one spotlight, one highlight inside each one. It's like, here's the actual key. Here's one thing. If you can't do anything else, consider doing this thing. So even though it is a cycle, it all starts at the top. So it starts off, by publicizing your programs and services. And what this means is, and when I say publicize, it's pretty precise. It's like whatever it is you're doing, if you're putting on programs, you're delivering services, you're doing advocacy, presumably your community, be it the members or the prospective members, that community or outside them, they want to know about this. So we're going to talk about how to do that, not from the mechanical perspective, but really from a timing perspective and why that's pretty important. Targeting your communications. How many here, do the vast majority of their communications is an email blast inviting everyone to come to something. PCHR in the house, guilty, absolutely of that. So there are other ways to do that. Again, all this has to be taken with a resource-sized grain of salt, right, about what we can accomplish. But there are smarter ways of looking at how you communicate and who you communicate with them and what kind of message you're sending. With your communications gives you that opportunity to engage your members. If they don't know what's going on or what value you're offering to them, it's going to be a little hard for them to engage other than, saying, well, I wonder whatever happened, whatever they did with that check I sent at the beginning of the year. And then after that, there's 2 little paths that kind of diverges a little bit. So they're in parallel. Well, they're not really in parallel because they meet again. So fostering your leadership pipeline is a super important chunk, and we'll talk about that. Scott said, I'll just pick on you because this is being recorded and you can't refute it. When you're introducing, kicking off the session tonight, he said, if you're interested in joining or being on the board, talk to you. And that's a common, but not necessarily the perfect approach. That's where many organizations operate just because of resource limitations. Parallel with that, just because it fits nicely, is protect your resource vitality, which is a fancy word of saying watch your money and watch your time, right? Associations tend not to really burn through money, particularly at the community level. It just kind of usually sits there. Most organizations got anywhere between $3,000 to $7,000 just sitting there in the bank, and it varies a little bit, but not dramatically. But the time of the folks who are, volunteering, the time of the folks who are doing volunteer leadership also needs to be protected. So if you do this stuff right, you have a very virtuous cycle here. So it's like, something, we got our membership excited because we publicized some stuff. We got them a message that they cared about. They actually showed up. 1 or 2 of them volunteered. One of them might even show up on the board in a couple of years. And also, we didn't burn up any money. Maybe we got a sponsor or 2 to inject some stuff in. Do all that stuff, do it well or do it well enough, and maybe we'll wind up saying, yeah, we can actually put on a few more events because we were able to get a few more people on board as volunteers. We might actually have the time to segregate and really think about our messaging. We might be able to put in a membership ambassador program and generate more leaders. And like, oh my gosh, and we did this and we got a sponsor, and it was like, we can even be better year after year after year. If you don't do this, and this is what does in a lot of membership associations, if you're not following a model like this, or you miss one for a long time, then it kind of crumbles and turns quickly into a death spiral. Probably the biggest killer of membership associations, and this is really one of the reasons I've focused, PCHR focused so much on the leadership team and building, not only folks as individual leaders, but leaders as a team. biggest killer of membership associations is leadership burnout. Okay, I don't know what the number is, and I know at ISPI I'm supposed to research that and spew the number back out. I'll just tell you from 40 years of watching this stuff, leadership burnout is what kills membership associations. And it's really this portion here about fostering your leadership pipeline. But again, no one of these pieces operates independent of the others. So, so at least, hopefully tonight we'll get some areas to focus on. So, and again, jump in if you got questions or observations. And with that, let's go move on.
Well, I mean, one example that fits into here is I would also competition from other member organizations, because you can be part of, your members could be part of PMI or ATD or so on and so forth. Like for my church, it's like, that's what I keep saying is, how are we any different than the church down the street? And so, everybody's offering a service on Sunday. What makes ours unique or attractive to everybody else's? And same kind of thing. It's even worse at a church. You don't have an email list. You have an email list of your engaged members, but you don't have an email list of past or something like that. And one of the, again, churches used to be all in person, but now with online services, now you have two different groups you're trying to engage at the same time. And most churches can't pivot to that either. So imagine trying to do this meeting, the virtual, the hybrid meetings. So that's kind of a different, different kind of thing. So mainly I would see is like, it's just competition. They're not really competing against each other, but they are, because especially in Virginia Beach, there's a church on every corner.
Right. Well, but not only that, your membership and your fellow leaders, you have other competition. It's kids soccer practice. There you go. What am I going to do? Hey, Bill, where are you on trading time with the grandkids and time with me? Blathering on about stuff like this. Obviously, the grandkids have got priority, just not tonight. So absolutely, that's there's this huge competition, and then if you are and then there's the whole, and you're absolutely right, Scott. And there's the whole thing we did at PCHR a couple of years ago about I think it was the haves and the have-nots, the virtual versus the in-person, and hybrid sucks, and that's the end of that one. That's a whole different that's a whole different sermon.
That's a whole nother session about
right.
about hybrid,
which
Mark and I are already complaining about for the ISPI conference, because they, you can virtually attend the ISPI conference. And it's like, we'll see how that's gonna work out. We're pessimistic about it.
Remember Billy Crystal and Mr. Saturday Night? Don't get me started. All right, so let's go ahead and move along here, and we'll like I said, we'll do a dive here, and I'll kind of watch the clock, and I'll watch your eyelids as best I can, and see what we've got going here. So let's talk about publicizing your programs and services. So, oh look, it's a pyramid model, or maybe it's a blue Christmas tree or something. I don't know what it is, but I kind of liked it at the time. So there are a couple of ways of looking at how we publicize. And I want to talk a little bit about how we lay out our programs and services, maybe how we think about them. So, and I'll tell you where this is going to go. We're going to talk about operational, tactical, and strategic. Okay. So operational is what we do to publicize, plan, and execute a given event. Tonight's event. Maybe May's, maybe thinking about May's Cracker Barrel, or June's ISPI Hampton Roads presentation on augmented and virtual reality. So that's like, what's next? What's on that front burner, if you will. So there's things we have to do about that. Tactically, there's the concept of the syllabus. Now, this is not wildly familiar from an membership association leadership standpoint, but I think it's very important that organizations have a an idea and a commitment to, this is what we're going to cover over the course of the year. And I'll tell you right now, it's subject-based, it's not presenter-based. And then finally, kind of not wrapping up, but underscoring all of this is also having a strategic view or a curriculum. Says, over the long haul, what is it that we have to do, either present or network or advocate for, to actually achieve whatever our vision is for the community. So we'll go ahead and just talk about these just a little bit more. So operational events is our intentions for a given session. Now, because we're all ISPI and ESQ and whatnot in the mix here, what do you think would be some useful metrics associated with creating and publicizing a given session? I'm going to keep asking about metrics, by the way.
Well, if you have a good email system, you can determine how many people actually opened the email, and then how many people actually signed up, and then how many people actually showed up. So that's kind of, attendance is usually a good, somewhat of a metric, but I can't even get my church to agree that attendance is a good metric. And I'm like, I'm data driven, and I'm trying to, how do we know my marketing is working? And it's based on attendance, but it's I'm not sure if it's an accurate metric or not. So
it's a challenge. I mean, so there's a couple things about those metrics. You can get you can get like industry. I don't want to say practices, but what are industry averages? For nonprofit and stuff like that. You go to MailChimp, you go to Eventbrite, and they'll say, especially like MailChimp, they'll tell you about, well, overall, this seems to be what open rates are and delivery rates and stuff like that. Eventbrite, if you're looking at, you can, not necessarily your events, but events in large, you can say, well, here's the average thing, around the world, if you put on free events, it's about 45% people show up. PDCHR dead on for that. Super common. So there are standards or goals or goalposts, if you will, you can compare yourself to. Absolutely right, Scott. It's a challenge. Do you have a meaningful, trustworthy way to measure that, as well as changes over time, just basic metrics type stuff. One of the challenges is that all of those are, I believe, lagging. It's like, how well did we do? They're after the fact. What I would suggest is that we also think about leading metrics. For example, how far in advance of the session are we actually publishing that it's going to be there? How early are we bringing people to the point where they can even make a decision, let alone whatever that decision is? What's our lead time to get a speaker? I mentioned before that I think topics are more important than speakers. So what's our lead time to actually come up with what it is we're going to finally talk about? So move on a little bit here. From the tactical or syllabus perspective, here I think is like where the gold is. In fact, I'll prove it. See, there's this where it says gold. I think this is where the money is. If you got to focus on you got to pick one thing about how to publicize your program and services, I think the most important thing to do is to say, we're going to commit to ourselves and to the public that we are going to do these things for at least the next 6 months, ideally through the end of the year. And that does not mean, we'll pick on PMI again. It does not mean, second Wednesday of every month and just have that on your events calendar that says TBD because it's second Wednesday. It means, no, this is what we're actually going to talk about. The subject will be, we're going to talk about Agile. The subject will be citizen development. The subject will be Bloom's taxonomy, something like that, and then find the speaker to present. It's okay if you're wrong, right? You can always change the event. No one's going to fine us or send you to jail for that. Say, turns out we found, it's not that we failed to find a speaker. It's like we found something even more interesting, more valuable for our members. Changing this up, let you know about it. This is us being on top of it. The other thing that's so great about having that, the other things that are really good about having that syllabus, having that thing published, your intentions published for the entire year, is that then your team gets to work together, your leadership team gets to work together, and say, listen, I know what our syllabus is. I'm the guy who gets, I'm the person who gets speakers. I'm going to start lining them up now. I don't have to get their bios. It's just great to get a name or get some commitment, down the stream. ISPI Hampton Roads, we don't publicize a lot, but Scott does a really good job about getting, prospective names, for at least a quarter out, and that's a really good start. And like I said, so marketing can say, I'm going to make up all our Eventbrite banners and stuff like that, or at least get them in a rough form. You say, oh, here's the cool picture that speaks to, 5 keys of leadership, to leadership. Here's a cool graphic that speaks to the other things. So you can get all that stuff pre-positioned in the like 80% ready form, pretty early. And then just as those final bits come together, you go edit, roll it out the door, and boom, you're supporting that operational event in a timely fashion without, all the traditional he said, she said, they said, that happens, when you're crunching in there, which I've seen a lot in a lot of membership associations, not so much in ISPI Hampton Roads, saw it a bit at PMI Hampton Roads, PMI, or excuse me, at ISPI writ large. There's a piece of that as well, just this guy's not so humble opinion. And then finally down here, the strategic curriculum I mentioned before. These are your intentions.
So I have a question about
Sure, go ahead.
tactical. So I heard you saying it benefits your volunteers and your leadership team. How does that benefit the members?
Probably modestly. I mean, first of all, it gives credibility, I believe, to your organization if someone says, "Hey, something," that rare moment when they, when they open an email and say, and there's the, "Hey, for upcoming events, click here, go to our website, go to our events page," whatever it is. When they see something there other than, a blank stare or, 5 repeats of TBD, I think it gives credibility to the organization, makes them a little more interested in paying attention. You're that much closer to them making a favorable decision to stay or to show up, or ask a good question, or like, hey, how come we never talk about this thing? It's like, oh no, that, you get something like that, that's gold. So I think that's really important in terms of your credibility to the membership. They are more likely, I think, to commit or think about committing to a given event if they've got a rough idea what it is. My calendar, for some organizations, I've already put that repeating thing, SVAVA, Southeastern Virginia Association of Volunteer Administrators, is every other month, 9 a.m. to noon Wednesdays. So that's already on there with me. But it never has any appeal to me, and I don't make any long-term plans to attend unless I know what the subject is. So it's a last-minute decision. By that time, other things have grown in competition with it. So without knowing what it is, it's hard for me to say, I am, just me personally, I am locking into that 3 hours, and come hell or high water, I'm going to be there. Well, what are you going to talk about? I'm not too sure, but I'm sure it'll be something about volunteer administration.
So in other words, just monthly chapter meetings is not probably a good strategy.
Let's see now. When I think when I say monthly chapter meetings, this is what comes to mind.
Yeah, they're
that's
not
about-
organized enough to know what they're doing or why they're going or any of those kind of things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. As long as I could have told you that the second Wednesday. So like I said, here's your money is. I think if you can commit to subjects, not presenters, you can always find presenters. And if you can't, you can do something else. Committing to what you're going to do over the course of the year, or at least 6 months out, I think is just like, super important. And like I said, it's a rallying cry. It gives the leadership something to work to. concurrently rather than consecutively. Thinking long term, not just immediate short term. Like, oh gosh, guess what's coming up? We better find somebody, type of deal. So I think the benefits are measurable, and I think it's useful for helping your memberships make that favorable decision of becoming engaged, if that's what engaged looks like.
Thanks.
Other thoughts, questions on this? All right, just yell out. I don't know who put something in the chat. If that was you, Scott, great. I don't know what it is. Let me know.
Bill.
that was,
Oh, he's just having technical issues. That's about it.
yeah,
Technical
I'm stable now.
That's why I didn't really repeat it. It's a
Right.
technical issue. It's
Okay,
not really
cool. You
nothing
put
really in the
Bill
chat.
and stay Bill. Got it. All right, so moving on. Go around the circle. Let's take a look at targeting our communications. So I love me some models. I really like Venn diagrams. I go for a quad chart, anytime. This one doesn't really fit in there, but I think it's pretty cool anyways. So targeting our communications. So we'll start filling in the blanks here in a little bit. I have a resource I can share later on, like a super way of doing this kind of high level view of making sure you're getting the right kind of message, the right message to the right people at the right time. Again, it's not resource cheap to do this. It takes some time in doing to make it happen, but we'll talk about at least the one thing out of this that you really should take a look at. So first off, I would suggest that any membership association think about its quote unquote brand values. These are, you could probably, I think they're adjectives. It's like that, people, we want people to have a sense of belonging. We want people to have a sense of professional progression. People want to feel proud that they're here, stuff like that. Some kind of adjectives that they feel. And these are all the things that we can think of that are important, that will influence our members and prospective members to take those desired actions I kind of hinted at before, to join the organization, to renew, to recruit somebody, to attend, to volunteer, all these things. That's the underlying purpose really of the messages we're going to deliver. But it's important to speak to that emotional component, and that's where those brand values are. Like I said, that feeling of belonging and being loved, and all those other things, as opposed to simply saying, if you come here, you'll get continuing education units. That's a whole other sidebar. Really quickly, there's way cheaper ways, time and money, to get continuing education units than going to a meeting. In addition, so along with brand values, you should need to really think about stakeholder groups. Okay, so when we're only sending one email out, however many versions of it, how many times we do that, but we send one email blast to everybody on the list. So they're the members, they're lapsed members, people we hijacked onto the list, people who showed up one time 7 years ago and haven't bothered to opt out yet, or it's just going into their moat monster. Then we effectively only have one stakeholder group, right? But that's not really, how we operate. For example, our members are one group. We want, maybe there's a message about thanking them for being members, and a targeted message about, oh, and by the way, it's time to renew. Our past members, it's like, if they haven't opted out, and people, organizations tend not to clean people out of their list. It's the individuals themselves clean themselves out. You can think of past members and say, hey, you were a member in the past. You don't have to rejoin, but I just want to let you know we're putting on this special event that might be of interest to you. We're talking about some of the things, new stuff we're doing this year, or whatever. Sponsors, I talked about them a little bit in that overview of the model. We were talking about protecting your resource vitality. So some membership organizations, particularly at the community level, will have sponsors. Again, pick on PMI, Hampton Roads. They've got one or two regular sponsors, Marathon and Tech Systems, I think, who throw them, some money every year. Some modest amount, but it helps them, with their operations and the services and products that they offer. Let's see now. The folks who are not yet members but ought to be, right? So remember the pile of rocks, the one on the bottom, the community. How do we attract the attention of everybody who's doing something that falls in the realm of performance improvement? Where do they live? Where do they gather? How do we get a message to them? Is there a LinkedIn group? Is there, an email list that we could get from ISPI Global that says, well, here's all the members that actually live in your area. Hey, see how that matches with your list? Are they all the same? If not, there's some potential there. So members, potential members, ex-members, people who ought to be members, stakeholders. If you're putting on something pretty cool, there might be partnership opportunities. PDCHR, we did that. Probably about 20% of our work over, maybe not quite that much, but a good portion of our work over last year was done in partnership with other organizations. So that was a separate email, and those were like one-offs, right? But that is still saying, acknowledging who our stakeholder groups are, and then we say, and from that, the intersection is, all right, the brand values that we care most about, and the stakeholder groups that we care most about, that's where we start focusing our individualized messages. This is where we grow from the, email to all to, we actually have segmented, if we have the technology or the smart spreadsheet or whatever it is, to understand, who's a stakeholder, who's a prospective partner, and so on and so forth. We can send them a slightly less than mass email to expand on particular brand value that should be of interest to them in terms of what it is that they need to get done in their life or in their corporate existence or stuff like that. So like I said before, and I'll make sure this gets shared out. It's not publicized anymore, but I kept a copy under common copyright, what is it, CC license, stuff like that. Creative Commons license. So I still have a copy of it, but it's a great booklet on how to do this, and really engage and communicate. So I've boiled like 40 pages down into a slide here. I think it should be pretty clear. Or am I jumping up and down? If not, it is now, that out of all this stuff, probably the very first thing I'd do is truly identify your stakeholder groups and figure out how you're going to tell the difference between them, right? This is the this is equity versus equality. Not every stakeholder, not every person on your email list needs or wants to hear the same message, or is it even relevant to them? So if you can say, we're going to provide the appropriate messaging so you can be an active participant as a member, as someone who's never been here before, as someone who might throw a couple dollars our way. Just understanding that is like super important first step, I think, into figuring out how to start tuning messaging a little bit. Not to mention finding 100 more to do this stuff.
So you're talking about, again, obviously customize the emails to different stakeholder groups. Wow, you've worked with a variety of organizations. How successful or unsuccessful are other media, such as social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever, in communicating to members and prospective members? What's Mark's opinion on that?
Mark doesn't have an opinion on that. Mark's looking at his bookshelf. At an ISPI conference, one of the first ones I attended, this is probably 7 or 8 years ago, I don't remember, was the guy who wrote the book Influencers, said something that really rang true. This is watching kids and trying to influence their behavior as a group. That was one of the examples he gave, and it was like getting them to wash their hands before eating their snack, something like that. And the long story, compressed wildly, all the details thrown out. The takeaway is that you have to use multiple channels to get their attention. For the kids, it might be, hey, Billy, you're in charge. Go tell somebody this, or you play phone tag, message on, put up posters, put little job aids out there right next to the apple, say, did you wash your hands? Stuff like that. You don't know, honestly, any given person at any given time, what particular mind space they're in. Do they understand messages that come through this channel? Do they blow off email and say, nope, text only for me, or like if I don't hear it on TikTok, it doesn't happen. You don't know. So really, and this is one of the things about, if you can automate, some of this stuff, you should include. I think you should include social media in that. And then in that like super great world, you actually track their responses. You know where they found it. Which is kind of interesting, but I don't think you should ever stop doing that. If you have, if you're very limited in resources, and say, listen, all I got is this spreadsheet. I think I got time to write, I can come up with, 2 separate emails, for an event. One's worded for members and one's worded for, people who are ex-members or stuff, previous members. That's fine. They pick a social media. Say, what's your best guess on where they live? Outside of email, right? Professional organizations. It depends on the nature of it. LinkedIn is a fair bet. To post something, not an invitation so much as something informational. Facebook, you might bump into people in that same group. Instagram, there's different group of people looking there. And don't forget, just text. If you have folks' permission to send them texts, they say like about maybe 5 to 8% of emails actually get opened up, but about 93 to 95% of texts get looked at. And getting looked at is job one, right? So I think it's whatever you can afford dollar-wise and time-wise, to put out there on as many channels as possible. The guy who wrote Influencers, I think his number was like, if you can put a message out 7 slightly different ways over 7 slightly different channels, odds are that a lot of people will take the desired action.
Yeah, I mean, and now there's Nextdoor, which is relatively new.
No, that sucks. Don't do anything there. It's a fist fight full of people peeing on each other's lawns.
Don't use that one. Don't use that one. Yeah, that one is. Let's see. Well, we used postcards because we were trying to mail an invitation to people that are close to a church.
Yeah. No, that's pretty good. So one thing I learned,
but it didn't. I can't say it worked. So we're not. I mean, it
depends on the post. Of course, and a marketer will help guide the discussion, but it kind of depends on the postcard. If you send out like a 5x7, this outside oversized one, right? They got to deal with it, right? If it's a flyer, it's like they have bulk mail, and mailman throws this sheet in there. Man, those go like, you might as well mount your mailbox on top of the recycling bin. So there are ways to make them useful. And again, you don't know,
okay,
attention you're going to get, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to hear your opinion or best practices, on that, and the best way is members inviting another member face to face or via phone call or a text.
Right.
That's that's the goal. That's the real golden one, but you have to encourage your people to invite a friend.
Right. So what is your message? How do you ask members to invite others?
And how to equip them with that message.
Exactly.
Because now you're not delivering the message as a volunteer or the board or the marketing group. You're trying to equip them to deliver that message.
Right. How do you develop all your members, or at least even a portion of your member, into ambassadors, really? So maybe that's the place to start and say, hey, listen, we have 5 people, who never shut up. So like, I would be one of those. When you talk about people, do you ever have the opportunity to talk about ISPI of Hampton Roads to others? Because here's something that we're doing that I think would be really important if we can get some more people to see, not just for us as to grow our membership, but really I think is beneficial to people who are in the performance improvement business, specifically blah blah blah. So you know, and that's the message that's delivered over coffee, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a good point, Scott. All right, cooking along. Let's talk about membership engagement. This one, we're going to go on a kind of a fun little track with this one. So first off, we might also, I encourage every organization, every membership association to challenge the word engage. What the heck does engage actually mean? Does it mean they showed up? Does it mean they opened an email? Is satisfied good enough? So PMI, Hampton Roads, 10% of the people show up for things, 90% of their people don't, and of those 90%, probably, we'll just say at least half of them will still renew their membership next year, even though they've never shown up. So that's about 45% of your people who are satisfied, or maybe lazy, but are satisfied with what they're getting, out of the organization. So that really, so that gap between satisfied and showing up, in the more traditional form of engagement, I think is a matter of, what's the value that the organization is creating, and how do people access that value? So many membership associations live and die by the monthly meeting, the monthly training session, right? And this is what we do. In the interim, there's little or nothing that goes on. PDCHR, I was abundantly adherent to that. Most of the messaging was, please show up for this next event, right? And not much of value, even though we had a YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel full of content, full of recordings, nothing really to encourage people to go to that, other than, oh, you attended, here's the link to that thing, right? So, so access to the value that you're creating is really important, but actually understanding the value that you should be delivering, you should consider delivering, that's a really good question. So I'm going to do a couple clicks here. Community members and our engaged members. So this should look familiar, right? So let's just talk about these groups of people, because once people are on those top two rocks, the volunteers and volunteer leaders, they are seeing value, they are creating value from themselves. It doesn't mean we're going to disregard them, but we already got those guys. We need to get the folks who aren't fully there yet. So question to the audience here, to y'all, what do the members of your membership association, what do they value, and how do you know? Hello? I love my crickets. I got more sounds too. Any thoughts on that?
You can just ask them through a survey, Mark. I think it's important to establish the with them. And I think with these different groups, that might be a little bit different for each person, and it can be whether it's a person with a family or somebody that's single, they're going to have different values and different things that are important to them, where, someone might take a leadership position and have to travel or move. The guy that's married or a person that has a family, that might not be the value for him.
Right, fair, yeah. So Chris, now who specifically did you want to ask those questions, knowing that they're going to have different answers and different capability of answering? Who are you going to send that survey to?
Well, let's take the church example. I would send it to the congregation, be anonymous.
Okay. So the congregation is roughly the members, right?
Mhm.
Okay, that makes sense. Other thoughts?
Yeah, it seems like part of it is a social thing and just networking. So trying to understand what the value proposition is with you're working with or getting with folks of like minds or in the same environment or same ecosystem, whether it being provider services, consumer services, or exchanges of information.
Right.
Community of interest, community of practice.
Yeah. So valuing. I mean, because because all of us are heavily steeped in professional associations, currently and historically, we tend to think about the educational value, but you're absolutely right. Are we asking? Are we trying to understand if there's value needed and delivered in terms of networking or socialization or advocacy? I've always, just personal opinion, I've always held it that for professional societies, it's a terrible place for networking because everybody in there, in theory, is looking for a slightly better job. It's like, well, hey, here's a lead I was considering. I'm going to give it to you instead. But there's, for me, when I go to a PMI meeting or stuff like that, like I said, I don't really do any project management stuff, but I enjoy the socialization. I'm pretty willing to admit that. Or broad leadership topics. I don't care about what color Gantt chart is best. Myself. So I'm not there for the education. I'm there for for other things. But yeah. So how does anybody know what I value or if they're delivering on that value? One more.
So like for a property owner association, the members value that we keep the neighborhood nice and their property values go up.
Mhm.
Is there a direct correlation between what the property owner association does and the price of things going up $200,000 in the last 3 years? A slight thing about it. I'm like, not really, but I can at least say that, hey, we've maintained property values with our actions. And what do they value? They want to make sure that people are following the rules and covenants that we've established, which is, key. And when we're not, we hear about it because they're like, well, how come this person hasn't cleaned up this? Or why is there an 18-wheeler truck parked in a driveway? Or strange, just strange things that people want to do in our neighborhood. And so we got to be on top of that. And, luckily, we have the funding to hire a property management company to be the bad guy, which is a good way, to follow through on things. And that's kind of, ideally when you have an organization, you either have to have really dedicated volunteers to follow through with things, or you're paying somebody to follow through with things if you have the budget to do that. And I think that's another kind of that value you value is can you actually deliver on what you promised you're going to deliver on?
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. I think it's a good question to ask. Like I'm part of that golf association. Like what do they value? I think they value the competition and the chance to measure themselves against others in a Saturday competition.
Right.
So it's like, oh, okay, and I think that. And how do we know? Because they come back or they're happy when they do well that week, kind of thing, and the chance to and to talk with them, or when we have a special tournament, how many people show up for that. So it's still a good question because yeah, I got hey, you've been on the board, now you're president. I'm like, huh, what does that exactly mean being president of this golf association? And probably what I need to do and what everybody does is you ask, well, what did the president do last year? And what they,
Right.
what are those responsibilities is always a key kind of thing, which should be the goal of every president is asking that questions. What do our members value and how do we know as a board or a president that we're meeting that value?
So I'm going to add a little wrinkle to that, Scott. So as we're going through these, I'm always going to highlight like one thing I think is like super important. I think we need to focus more. This is like really, I don't say out of the box because I hate that term too, because the community is in the box here. I think that membership associations should consider whether or not they're doing a good enough job understanding the values of the folks who are not yet members but should be, right? There's a reason they haven't joined. Now, it could be I don't have the time, or whatever on that. I already know it all. I get that a lot for myself. But if you can find, and this kind of goes back to that the messaging stuff, if you can find a way to communicate, and connect somehow with folks who ought to be interested but aren't, or the folks who have left, who were ex-members and have now just like rejoined the more general community of interest, you may find that there are values that that are not being met, that your organization is not delivering, simply because you didn't care about it, right? I didn't say care. We didn't know enough about it to care about it and to consider it as part of our curriculum and part of our syllabus. So this is, there's some shoe leather, virtual or otherwise, involved with this, trying to find out, like who's the smartest person about, who's really good at project management, in our area. But oddly enough, they've never shown up for a meeting, or they've never even considered joining, or they joined and dropped us. Like, why did that happen? Did they join because they wanted to get the members rate, to the conference? Like, well, here's the other things that happened at the conference. Is there, you can ask them. It's like, in a follow up, somehow. Scott, you've got a much better presentation than I do on surveys versus other data collection instruments. We actually have that online. Scott did that last February, right? For PDCHR. I say February 2022, and that in terms of how to do this stuff. But I would just encourage you that this is that little different things, like what do the folks around us who haven't joined or engaged, are they valuing things that we're not even considering delivering? So,
or it goes back to, like my church, it's like, well, if we're all about serving others, then how are we doing that different than all the other service groups that they can be a part of? It's a competition kind of thing. I'm like, how are we the differentiator from other organizations and such? And so it's a, it's a tough nut to keep and think about. But again, I like this, what you're presenting today, because then I can kind of determine where are we in these organizations I'm in, where are we strong and where do we need to take a closer look at things.
right.
So it's already got me some ideas
Good.
about that.
Yeah.
So thanks. I
particularly-
like that idea about that. Again, what, how can we communicate who's not in our community? That's a grand idea.
Right. First you got to know where they are. You got to find them, right? If geography is your basis, that's actually pretty easy. You've already found them, and you got a rough idea who's not there. So then the question is, what's the communication, and how do you deliver that communication, which we will not solve this evening. One other note, because Scott, you brought this up, a couple times about, there's a church on every corner, the competition for eyeballs or butts and pews and stuff like that. So when I worked, different work in the past, with traditional nonprofits, or strictly mission focused, not necessarily focused on an internal community, much more focused on serving the community around us. One of the things that I would always try and emphasize with them, and I stole this out of like one of my favorite little books, is how do you make sure that your organization is distinct and sustainable? So if the mission of an organization, not mission, but if the purpose of an organization is we make everyone's life better, you are on a path to failure, right? It's like, what does better mean, and how many is everyone? It's like, what is it, 7.5 billion people, on the world now? So can you neck that down and say, well, the people in this zip code and sub zip code, we're going to make their life better because we're going to keep out Amazon in or whatever it is, much more purposeful. Then you've got something there. And then of course, the sustainability is like, well, you've done good stuff this year, will you be able to do it again next year? Which really speaks to this whole, again, this virtuous cycle. Is like, this is all about being able to do something special for a community, and the sustainability part is this whole protect your resource vitality and building leadership, so you can come back next year and keep doing it. So, Scott, thanks for helping me move along to the next one. That was excellent. All right, so so where are we now? So we talked about publicizing program services and targeting your communications and engaging your members. So next, we'll talk about fostering the leadership pipeline. Then we'll take a look at the clock and see how we are if we want to talk about the green stripe over there. We'll probably have time, just a little bit on that. So again, talking about fostering your leadership pipeline, or your leader pipeline, because it fit nicer in the box. So we already touched on this. Let me show you the conscription model, which is the most typical model for building membership association leadership teams. It starts with a prospective volunteer who honestly could be anybody, probably a member of an organization, but not necessarily so. It's someone we made eye contact with or virtual eye contact with. And then we ask them this critical question: would you like to be a board member? Scott, you're guilty of this, by the way. As is everybody else who's running a membership association, community level. Would you like to be a member of the board? And then what happens is they become a member of the board, and they stick around for 2 or 3 years or 2 or 3 cycles or whatever, and realized that's not for me, and then they disappear off the face of the earth. This happens a lot. Even if they didn't start out, even if it wasn't such a short cycle, this conscription or voluntold model. A lot of times when people hit that last spot or the highest position in the organization, there's pretty frequently an exit, and we don't see them again. Smaller organizations, sometimes if there's a lot of heart and soul in it, and people will cycle back through and say, well, I already did this, I'm going to do it again. But even that becomes wearing after time. So I'm going to suggest that we look at, consider a different way of looking at, our leadership pipeline. And again, will we be able to do all of this? Is it practical? No, but it's, if nothing else, maybe it's aspirational. So again, here's our prospective volunteer. Is, like I said, is it the stranger? Probably not. Is it a member? Probably should be. Is it an engaged member? Somebody that we've actually seen before, or we know has a sense of how we as an association operate. That's ideal. But we take what we can, right? And we know who we know. So we give them one job. You had one job, right? It's like, I need you to write this thing. So that first one probably shouldn't be, okay, we want you, excuse me, we want you to write all communications for the next year. So that's your volunteer. That's your volunteer trial period. That's not fair to them, and it's not healthy for the organization. So you pick something nice, like, at our next gathering, could you be the host, or could you be the MC, or could you just go, not even that, introduce the speaker. We want to give other people a little time to do this and stuff like that. So just give one little thing. If they show up, that's really good. If they attempt, that's super. If they do it well, that's fantastic. But don't rest the future in an organization on someone that we've not seen volunteer in our association yet. Now, if they do that, then you consider saying, all right, so did pretty well. We brought something extra to the table, still has a spark in her eyes or whatever. And we can think about them as some degree of an established volunteer. They may do this for a while, and they might do the other thing for a while. They may volunteer and say, hey, that was really fun introducing that person. I'd like to do that all the time, because it's actually really good for me. I can try some of the stuff I've been learning at Toastmasters or whatever. So we have an established volunteer, and of course there's all the love and feeding and care that goes with maintaining your workforce, because that's who your volunteers are. They're staff that just don't happen to be paid, and don't have a huge consequence if they walk away. So we move someone along to becoming, essentially board eligible. You volunteered for a while, you've had some successes, brought some ideas, and this is fuzzy stuff. There's no quantitative metric, I think, that advances somebody along this chain. But think about this as, as a life cycle, really. Board eligible, board member, becoming a board member in there, becoming one of the officers. So if you have a large enough board, you'll have, you may have like a bunch of directors, and 3 or 4 of them have specific roles as the president, as the treasurer, as the secretary, and then other folks might be, well, I'm the director of this, or they just may be a director at large or stuff like that. But anyways, you get them into the more leadership roles, treasurer, secretary, president-elect, so on and so forth, and then ultimately, chief operating or chief elected officer, if elections are how you do things. So here's your president, or in ASQ world, it's the section leader or the chairman or whatever. And then, the last step, not the last step, but a continuing step, the next jump is really, what do they do, after they stand down? And this, to me, this is not the most interesting one, but it is kind of interesting, is what do you do next? Do you go from local up to regional, up to national, up to global, or whatever? Or do you say, there's another place for you? It's like the presidents of the U.S. It's like, we always roll them out for dignitary funerals, right? Or we put Bush and Clinton together for Haiti relief or stuff like that. So there could be like a special deep project, or could you help us figure out where the heck everybody is in our community that isn't members? Would you be willing to be, our ambassador and just talk about that? And once you get them back to us, we'll take care of the rest of the relationship building with the prospects or stuff like that. So thinking about that is important for perpetuating, not only the organization, your membership association, but the larger community of which you're a part. For me, though, here's where we really got to focus our time, is on those established volunteers. This is where the love and care and attention, really belong, because that's where you start building the momentum for them to carry through the rest of this, the rest of this cycle. So, it's an interesting question, is like, what are metrics associated that might be associated with volunteers in general, or even here just looking at what does it mean to be, an established volunteer? Any thoughts on that? Metrics associated with this?
I mean, established volunteers are ones who show up every meeting and get their tasks done. That's the key. It's like,
right. So
those are the key kind of things. Yeah. And maybe, they can invite a friend to be along with them, right. That kind of thing. Be able to share that their volunteering is of such a value, and they can share that value. Because again, you could have people that are great at being volunteers, but if they can't share the value with somebody else and invite others and can't be really an ambassador, then that's kind of the separation between just a volunteer and an established volunteer. So that's how I would look at it.
I think that's super. I mean, so you covered some lagging indicators, all those counts, how good were they at showing up? Put some kind of assessment on the quality of the work they did. And then, leading indicators, I think, are, have they learned, have they volunteered, not volunteered, but have they suggested changes, have they, applied what they've learned, in the environment, and say, here's something else we could consider. And I think that includes, that matter of, inviting others, understanding and being confident enough to put their own credibility on the line to invite somebody to participate. So so absolutely, I think that's
well, and I think you also want them to bring in new ideas. Otherwise, if you have volunteers and we keep doing the same thing over again, we're not going to progress anywhere. That's what I've determined, is like, we're just trying to stay alive. We're just trying to, keep the lights on. I'm like, no. We don't We don't need volunteers that just want to keep the lights on, because
Right.
the lights will go off if we have that kind of attitude. We have to be progressing, as you said. Here's something else we could be doing. Here's something new we could be doing.
Yeah.
Bringing those things.
And that's why, this part of, using this to foster your leadership pipeline, bringing the new blood, the new thoughts, the new excitement, the new energy level in is just as important. It's not just, it's way more important than, it's like, all right, well, yeah, we got to do this. A kind of a go, no go. If you go broke, so be it. But really that growth comes from, building that leadership pipeline. Like super duper important. I'm looking at the clock here. We've got, I forget, Scott, what do we promise for our stop time?
8:30?
All right, well, if you
I
guys,
think it's 8:30.
all right, well, then we're good. If you guys are still willing to, listen to each other on, there's just a couple other points I'd like to make, but I just want to make sure I wasn't overextending my promise, which is a weird thing because I'm the guy who wrote the stuff, including the times on this, but then I forgot. All right, so since we've got the time, and again, please feel free to continue to jump in with questions, and commentary and stuff like that. Let's go ahead and talk about this. Is great because I don't usually get to the time to talk about these things. We do kind of hand wave and say, "Don't go broke," but talking about protecting your resource vitality. So, show of hands or right clicks or whatever. How many people are familiar with the BCG matrix, also known as the Boston Consulting Group matrix?
I was, but I'm not. I think I think it's come and gone.
So where's that on Bloom's taxonomy? Recognizes it? Knows I've seen it before somewhere or something?
It's probably pretty low there.
Right. So this I think is like super helpful. When an organization is faced with a bunch of opportunities or a bunch of choices to make about where they're going to spend their money, more importantly, spend their time. Like I said, membership associations are not known for, at least where I've been working, they're not known for having tons of dollars, but the more dedicated people you have, the more dedicated hours that are available to you. So the Boston Consulting Group came up with this matrix, or a commercial version of this, and they talk about stars, cash cows, question marks, and dogs. But I'm a dog owner, and for them, dogs are bad, so I don't use dogs in this one. And what they, and their axes are a little different here. But I think, so when a leadership team is deciding, what's our mission mix? What's our portfolio? Where are we investing our time? All the things we do, all the things we might consider doing. How do we periodically look at those and determine, which should we do more of, which should we stop, which should we consider bringing into the mix, and what has to go away to make room for that. So this is a pretty interesting way to structure that conversation, with pretty pictures. So the two axes, the vertical axis, the y-axis, is purpose alignment. Is the thing that you're looking at, again, might be something that exists, might be something that you're considering, how well is it aligned with the purpose of the organization? Remember, I've used the definition of purpose is, what group of people are you helping, and how do we know that their lives are better because of your quote unquote help? So, is this well aligned with that or not? And then the x-axis, axis rather, is resource impact. Will this help generate more money or time? Or honestly, you can't generate more time. Everybody gets 24/7, period, right? Does it generate more efficient use of the time, or a greater willingness to give of one's discretionary time? Or is it more of a drain? It's like, this is going to take us a lot of time, and it may also take a bunch of money to do. So if you're contemplating something that says, something, if we do this right, this will free up our time, and will be dead on purposeful. This completely matches our mission and purpose and vision, stuff like that. This project we're contemplating, again, a new one or one that's existing. And something, it's not a huge drain on us. It already exists. It works well, stuff like that. So that kind of fits up here in the stars. It's like, absolutely, no brainer. Let's hold on to that. Now, what about the ones that, like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely something we should be doing. This is, connection to students in the performance improvement world, stuff like that. It's Bill, you've engaged, in this question, through ISPI and, PDCHR, and so on and so forth. So like, how do we reach out to your college students or maybe even pre-college students and get them, smarter, engaged, or excited about, our profession or our church's mission or whatever. The trouble, I shouldn't say trouble, the challenge with, reaching out to youth is that it's consumes a lot of resources, not necessarily dollars, but, once you walk in, if you're saying, well, I have to deal with college, then you have to deal with college administration, right? If you're dealing with, grade school and high school and stuff like that, it's a bigger task. You generally either have to go in through an already approved program, and whoever's going in on behalf of organization has to be screened. If you're going to do something for the students, anybody involved with that has to go through clearance and background checks. Doesn't mean it's less important. It just means that it consumes more resources. So this is what we call, these kind of fall in this question mark block and says, should we do this? I think we should, but it's a matter of affordability. What would we have to give up to do this, and what risks do we take on with this? I mean, and you can even ask that about existing, efforts. It's like, this still has a purpose, but it's getting more and more expensive. We can't keep putting on, we can't keep doing free dinner. We know it attracts people, which is important, but we just don't have the money to keep paying for that. So we may have to change that. So to the rescue for that are projects down here in the bottom right quadrant, called your cash cows. Now, these are things an organization might do because it raises resources, even if it's not well aligned with their mission. So I haven't seen this a whole lot, to be perfectly honest, in membership associations, not nearly as much as I've seen in the traditional nonprofit world. We'll say, well, we don't do that, but if we tap into this federal program and start serving napkins along with our meals through the federal napkin program, that will actually spin off a lot of money for us, or it'll generate a lot of revenue for us.
Yeah. So how about selling Christmas trees on your church lot? It has nothing to do with the personal alignment, but it's a cash cow.
Right. Absolutely right. So does it make sense to do that? And maybe if you can track or feel reasonably confident that the revenue we raise from selling the Christmas trees in the church parking lot actually goes to the mission of the church, right? And if it's to service debt, that's kind of icky. If it's to help grow the congregation, or keep the congregation engaged, or reach out or stuff like that, then it makes perfect sense, because that takes it from the cash cow to like, well, we can try it, and if it makes sense, maybe it'll turn into one of these star things. And then the no-brainer.
I mean, another one that's probably more on the stars, like a no-brainers. Every fall we do a clothes drive and collect clothes and give them away to anybody in the community. It's like everybody gets to get rid of all the stuff in their house that they've been holding on to, and we get to give it away. Now, does it align with our purpose of getting people to become members of our church? Not quite sure about that. Haven't heard a whole lot of, oh, I came to your clothes drive and now I come to become a member. So it could be one of those ones I'm not exactly sure it aligns with our purpose or not. Yeah. So it's just just another example of things. And every organization does things because that's the way they've always done them. And nobody ever asks, should we keep doing this or not? Because usually it's a passion project of that 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people, and they want to keep doing it. And it's like, you can't do everything.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
It's funny you mentioned this. I think it's like the second time you talked on it's the way we've always done it. It's the way the last president did it. It's the way the church has always done this. So you remember total quality leadership, or no, it was total quality management. Dr. Deming, super popular in the 90s ish. Vance, you were probably all over this at the time. No doubt you've got a memory for stuff like this. So one of the things that he on his sermon, or from his pulpit rather, was one of the worst things you can do is just do what the person before you did, because, and Mark's spin on this, that's the third law of thermodynamics, all about entropy. You are inevitably going to do it probably worse if you just say, I'm going to do exactly what Charlie did over the last 2 years, and don't inject any new thought or go back to the what's our purpose. Does our purpose still make sense? Does this fit our purpose? Is this in our mission? Is this in our vision? So I think it's very important to understand what the last person did, but I usually think it's more important so you don't repeat that maniac's mistakes. So again, just me and Dr. Deming on that one. And then so just to wrap this up, and obviously the place, the easiest thing is stop burning resources on stuff that doesn't matter, right? It's like, this doesn't really fit with our purpose anymore, and just spend a lot of time on this. Now, it's sort of okay to let it atrophy. It will, but it's much better to just make that command decision. Say, as of this day, we're no longer doing that because it's dumb, or because it's not valuable to our members or the community around us, and it doesn't generate any, doesn't make time or make money, so kill it off. Yes, Scott.
So an example is our church was putting in tons of resources to do a K through 6th grade Sunday school, and we realized that we had like 10 volunteers and 8 kids. Again, it was like, well, we have to have Sunday school, and I'm like, not if we don't have members who have families who have kids. And it was a chicken or egg thing. Well, we have to have a Sunday school so we attract families and members. I'm like, that's an assumption.
Right.
So they decided, and they switched it to doing a Thursday night Sunday school and didn't even call it Sunday school. They called it on Thursday night, and that works out much better. They have 6 adults and 25 kids, and they just do it on Thursday nights. Because that was the other thing, is it's like tasked with stuff. So yeah, you have to kind of pivot, but it's hard because you have to get away from, that's the way, when I grew up, everybody went to Sunday school and then they went to church service. And it's like, well, that's not providing any value anymore. So that's one of those ones that at least our church has decided that they made the hard decision that it wasn't worth the effort.
We have validated this practice through the buggy whip model, right? All right. So any questions or thoughts about this one? It didn't go really in depth on this. I think it's straightforward. Like I said, I think it's a nice portfolio. Your metrics, on how you're using this, might be thinking about, it's dollars, quality, timeliness, and stuff like that. Of course, in project management world, you're only going to get 2 out of the 3 on this. So what I'd like to do then is, are there other questions or thoughts that you have right now? Something that was unclear. I mean, y'all know how to get hold of me, and that'll be in the follow-up email, anyways. But I just kind of want to throw this open, for general questions. Scott, did you get my email, by the way? Bill, I see you got your hand up. Scott's going to look for his email because I think there might be some questions. There might be a question there for you to ask. Bill, go ahead.
Okay, I'll jump in. So actually, Mark, your presentation here is like, the graphics and everything is really captivating.
Thank you.
You're using PowerPoint and Zoom, or what are you using to get your message here?
It's Keynote, so the Mac version or Mac answer to PowerPoint, and basically how it comes. I happen to have 2 screens, so the actual presentation, when you see me looking over here, instead of using my peripheral vision, I'm just sharing that entire screen. So that's where the presentation resides, off to my side. What's in front of me is Keynote, and PowerPoint provides this as well, is a presenter's view. So I say, so on the left I say, here's what's showing, and on the right, here's what's coming up next, and on the bottom are my notes to myself, and I've got like this 27-inch, Mac or whatever it is, this monster. So there's enough real estate to do that. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate comments on the, on how it's built. This is not I didn't make this one up this morning, but I did tweak it pretty significantly. So, but yeah, I've presented this or versions of this or portions of this, to a handful of other organizations, usually under the PDCHR flag.
Yeah, looks good.
So the follow-up question that Mark wanted me to ask and is, what are some ways to know we're headed in the right direction? If you're in a member organization, how do you know you're headed in the right direction, either as in doing these things or just overall? So I think it's just a great, kind of key thing. It's, for myself being on the board of a bunch of organizations, it's like, how well are we doing each of these items? But it also goes bigger, back to the whole thing, how do we know, I think, again, we have to ask our members, hey, is this organization doing what it should be doing? Are we doing what we said we're doing? I think we're heading in the right direction if people can also restate that value.
Right. I mean, that's always a great test. I've used this one, a version of that question before. Just for introductions. It has nothing to do with being a membership association, but I'll have somebody. So one particular anecdote. So I used to go to this gym pretty regularly. I was there twice a week. Working out with a trainer, blah blah blah, all this other stuff. And at one point, like on a Monday, the guy who owned the gym said, "Hey, Mark, remind me again, what is you do?" I said, this, that, and the other thing. And then, like about a week later, I asked him. I forget if I asked him or he said, I wanted to introduce you to this guy. And he says, tell him what you do. I said, well, Chad, let's do a test whether or not I communicated effectively. What do you think I did? Right. So there's that membership question. What do you think? What did you come out of this? I mean, just a little, sidebar, another trip through history. That's how I found ISPI of Hampton Roads in the very first place. So I was, a guy looking for gainful employment at the time, and a job coach had suggested to me that I do like a mini 360 sort of thing. But says, reach out. This was his advice. Said, reach out to your past clients and ask them, the ones you liked, and ask them what they liked about working with you. And so what I did was, so I basically asked them that question, said, hey, just write back, free form, stuff like that, and I'll figure out how to sort through it. And not one of them, and I thought I was looking for a project management job, but not one of them came back and said anything, about that. I took all their words, and I got feedback from like 5 or 6 people, and the question is, what did you think about me, really? You boil it right down. What value did I bring? What did you enjoy? So on and so forth. What value did I bring to you? Put it back in there and threw it all in a little word cloud generator. And the 2 biggest words that came out were systems and improvement, right? So actually, the one of the reasons I did that, I said, I need something to put on my card other than I'm a consultant. I'm an SFM consultant. I do stuff for money. I said, I want to be a little more specific title than that. And so I went and Googled, system improvements and maybe like 1 or 2 other keywords in there. And the first thing that came to the top was Hampton Roads ISPI chapter. And I said, well, this is where I have to go. And that was 2012 and stuff like that. And Bill answered my email and he gave me a copy of Human Competency's book. And Scott you were the presenter, and like your second slide was said systematic and systemic on it. And it's like, all right, so now I get it. Now I've actually found a home. But I wouldn't have found that home based on what I thought I was good at. I got there based on what what the value others thought I brought to to the table. So yeah, it's a super point, and I got to talk two more times about myself. I want to just kind of click forward. So here's the canned answer to that staged question. First off, I'm not going to go, I'm sure everybody here is much more qualified to talk about instructional design than I am, and predictive this and formative that and subjective or subjunctive or past participle, the other thing. I don't really understand those terms. I always have to go look them up somewhere. I know they exist. So what I was thinking in terms of the how do we know that we're at least pushing ourselves in the right direction? So absolutely, you got to get that confirmation stuff, like Scott proposed. It's like, what did you hear from your members or your non-members? Is it what you expected to hear? And how do you use that to recalibrate or pat yourself on the back? For me, I've got two questions that any membership association can ask about itself, or I can ask them, and they give me like a 95% confidence, if they're going to be around for a while. So if it's okay with you guys, I'm probably going to run a little bit past 8:30 here, just talking about these, not too much, but I just wanted you to be honest about the time. If you got to bail, you got to bail. So here's the two questions I'm always happy to ask any organization, and then I feel like Mr. Know-It-All when they answer. So the first one is, how far out is your useful schedule published? You think all the way back, this was about publicizing your stuff, specifically the strategic, the tactical. Do you have a syllabus out there? This is the same question. How far out there is your useful schedule published? So this is a kind of a lagging indicator, to be perfectly honest, in that it really speaks to, are you committed, as a leadership team, and the media circle around them, are they committed to leadership, which a large part of that is being forward looking? Are they willing to commit to each other and say, here's a plan that we can all work to independently, we don't have to necessarily wait on handoffs? Are we committed to our members in that we're providing them the opportunity to make informed decisions about their level of participation and engagement? So this is like super one. So if the answer to this question is it isn't, that says, well, we're probably not doing quite as well as we might wish to be doing. If it's, well, we always have next month's up in a timely fashion, that's still ahead of a lot of folks in the back. If somebody can say we always have at least 3 quarters up, even if they're not dead on right, it's like, wow, that's fantastic, and all that stuff I was saying about 6 months and a year, super stretch goals. But if you got it at least little distance, if you got to look through the top of your glasses instead of the near focus part, then that's super. Like I said, it's a lagging indicator. You have done some stuff to get to this point where you can put that out there and use it as a useful work tool and a decision tool. And my second question, this is like my favorite one, is why haven't I taken the dogs out yet? My second question is, who is your president-elect? All right. So a not uncommon answer, not the majority answer, but a not uncommon answer response to that is, I'm not even sure who the president is, or section leader or chair or whatever. It's like, okay, well, there's things you need to do about that. I think the president-elect, I think we put him or her in that position last year at election, so I'm pretty sure we have one. I think it's Mary, so that's there. There's something like that. But as for who's down the line, inevitably the blank stare. So that's a word to go if you can actually answer the question. What that means is you've really, worked the whole thing about fostering the leadership pipeline, right? Say, the best answer is, I don't know, because it's a highly competitive position. Here's probably 3 or 4 hot runners though that are, going to be somewheres in the next couple of years. Oh my God, that's the best. And and you also have to have a pretty sizable organization for that to even be realistic. It could be the president-elect is, well, it's probably whoever's treasurer now, because we usually go, treasurer, president-elect, and then president. That's just kind of how we've always done it. So we rotate like that. It's like, well, that's good. You have some prediction of continuity, and certain risk of staleness, I suppose, something like that. But but you ought to have a look forward. And so this really works out as a kind of leading indicator of like where you might be and how healthy will it be, and what support mechanism do you have in place such that the president-elect does not have to start reinventing the wheel on day one. Well, that's a whole nother talk about strategic planning and strategic intent and stuff like that. So these are my two questions. I ask these two questions in any organization, and I can tell you pretty much everything else you need to know about them, other than what it is they deliver, right?
So you're saying those are key performance indicators of any member-run organization, and you can determine how successful or they're going to be. A leading indicator almost based on these two event things. It's probably true.
I feel real comfortable with that. I've gone back. I've used it, with organizations. It's not like I've done some formal study on this or anything, but I've asked this question about organizations, and where I knew I was going to be around, to see the answer. I've asked them, and folks would say, yeah, in hindsight, which is, you're always going to get a ton of bias with that. In hindsight, would these questions have been useful? Would you have been able to answer these questions, in a meaningful manner and stuff like that? So yeah, I'm, this is like pulse and temperature and blood pressure all together.
Yeah, for the first time, our golf group published our calendar, because some like Saturdays, the course is already hosting a tournament for another group, and we didn't know until the week of. We're like, wait a second, we need to know when we can actually play in the next 6 months. Like, oh, what a brilliant idea! So
there was only a device that allowed us to mark things down for the future.
Oh, I did. I went and asked them about every Saturday between now and July, so it wouldn't be like a surprise kind of thing. It's like, oh, so we know that. We know April 8th there's a tournament. We can't play that day. And we know we can't play tomorrow because there's another tournament. Like, okay, at least we know those days, so we don't send out an invite to sign up for a tournament, for a normal Saturday tournament that isn't going to happen, because that's happened in the past. And it's like, just as frustrating as nobody coming is you come and you can't actually play. So that's happened, the key thing. But so at least one of my organizations does that. But like my church, I'm like, I think we do it weekly. Just like not really that helpful. So I'm like, oh, we could do much better in coming up with that stuff so that people know what's coming and don't have to use their memory to remember that the close drive's every September.
Right.
Because we were smart, and we ordered a sign that says close drive first Saturday of September, or second Saturday of September. Yeah, second Saturday, because first Saturday is Labor Day. So we already have a sign that we can reuse to publicize it.
Yeah.
So it's already set. And like same thing, we know Christmas Eve services. We don't have to put December 24th on. And we say Christmas Eve services, and we set the times so we can reuse that banner in front of our church. So we've done some things, but these are good ideas for organizations about that useful schedule of stuff on those things. And at least the church I'm involved in, they have no idea who is going to be president-elect. They're just like, they're not forward thinking. But those are, again, and I also think that you should ask yourself in your organization at work, how do you know that your team and your organization that you're part of at work is heading in the right direction? I mean, that's another reflective question that you need to just ask in your professional work life, because oftentimes, you never think about that. Are you busy? Are you just being busy?
All right.
Are you going in the right direction that's providing value to the rest of the company, kind of thing? Because I've never actually been in a revenue producing job. I've always been in corporate support jobs, but the same kind of thing. How do we know that we're heading in the right direction? So I thought that question that's in there is we need to even ask ourselves in our own professional work.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, folks are dropping like flies. So last call, we're well into overtime. Vance and Chris have already left, so I thank them in absentia for their participation. But yeah, Bill, Scott, anything else here?
No, thanks for taking the time to share
Oh.
your best practices and give us some, a different view to analyze the performance of a member organization. That's really what this is all about,
It
because we're all
really
part
is.
of these. Is how should I, what's a framework to analyze a professional or nonprofit or member organization? And you've given us some good frameworks for that.
Yeah, it's interesting, to me. I mean, this is really, the whole premise of why PDCHR, came into being, is that I wasn't aware of a framework I could share with folks, when I was a chapter partnership committee chair, or even just my own lessons learned, through bumps and bruises. And the other interesting thing that led to forming PDCHR was discovering or verifying that institutionally nobody actually really cares about small community membership associations. There are organizations that take care of, or there are professional associations that takes care of folks who run large organizations that are membership groups. But yeah, nobody necessarily has the willingness or capability, capacity to invest in improving folks who are doing this strictly on a volunteer.
So you have to go back. It's always the funny, like, well, here was the summary of the presentation. Here's what it was really about. And I don't know if the summary said, here's some best practices on how to analyze a membership or nonprofit organization, because that's what you've really provided for us today, is the ways to take a look at it. So I'm like, oh, I'll have to think, go back to that. You might, when we post this or add that into the description, because that's
Yeah.
pretty interesting, is you've given us some questions and things to think about, because you can always just say, well, this professional organization is run better than the other three I'm involved in. You just you rate it, but you rate one against all the other three that I'm in, but it's again some common metrics to rate different groups again. So it's one's that's because I'm involved in 4 different wildly different ones with ISPI, church, a golf group, and a property owner association. So it's like, well, wow, those all common, but there's some common kind of things in that and stuff.
Yeah,
And
for me, it's.
People.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Bill.
A common thing is people.
yeah, the same common thing is people in a community trying to improve your community in some way. So that's, at least I've seen that in all of them. But how well are we achieving that? And sometimes again we get so much in the weeds we forget the big picture.
Right. Yeah. Going back just a little bit, to your point about, what was the purpose of tonight's, what would be the summary? And, again, so here's that same question about what was the value that I thought we were bringing, what was the value that, you and, the audience, take away from that. So, to be perfectly honest, I never thought I did not conceive of this as a set of analytical tools. I was looking at this as really, this is kind of the framework for the overall curriculum for PDCHR in terms of doing this. So here's like all the chunks. We may not label them as such, but that virtuous cycle is essentially what I've asked people to teach to and to speak to. And
yeah, but I could create a rubric based on what you've presented. Here's the questions to ask your organization just going through your presentation. How well do you publicize your thing? How well do you target communications? How well do you engage your members? And then your questions, how well do you get, things like that. And you can just, specific ideas to evaluate your own member organization. Some of the items would be NA because they don't necessarily apply to every member nonprofit organization, but most of them do. So it's and then I think it was Marcia who had the thing is like, you go around to the audience at the end of a presentation like that and go, what's one takeaway you got from this? And to make sure those can they restate that, or do they align with what you thought? It's always the best assessment of any training is ask the people, what did you learn or what's your takeaway? And hopefully they match with whatever those unwritten objectives were.
What was so the surveys we use with PDCHR, which I just lifted out of Will Thalheimer's book. It's like, well, the question boiled down to, what did you take away from this? What's your commitment to try and do some of this stuff? And did you learn anything that'll help you kick some obstacles out of the way?
Yep.
So,
Same kind of things, but you can either do that in a survey or just ask people at the end of it, because that's just that reflection is important, or you can be more directive and go, here's the 3 things you should do,
right.
which again you kind of did at the end. Here's the 2 questions you need to ask,
Right.
which you kind of asked that at the end, which is good.
All right.
Hey, gentlemen, I am going to run off.
All right, Bill. Thank you. Thank you for your
have to, thank you. Thank y'all.
right.
Scott, always a pleasure.
All right.
Yeah, we're
Thanks,
going to
Bill.
run out, do a little shopping. Yep.
All
Okay.
right.
That's good. All right. Thanks,
Right.
Bill. Appreciate it.
Again, thanks for creating this. Send me the link, the recording. I don't think we need necessarily the deck. The recording's good enough for people, and we'll kind of phrase it. I'll try to recreate an attractive why you should watch this kind of thing. I'm like, oh, this is interesting kind of thing. I think it's valuable for those kind of things. And please share it with the rest of your network.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's
Yeah,
it's
always do. I was hoping more from my network would be able to show up, but
they signed up, but they didn't come. I'm like, oh.
that's what it is.
I saw new names. I'm like, oh, I love cross pollination and different backgrounds and such. But no, that was fine.
The tyranny of free.
The tyranny of free and the tyranny of people get distracted. It's just, again, that's why, why don't people come to church on Sundays? All the other distractions or stuff.
Sure.
There'll be another one. That's just it. There'll be another one.
Right.
Kind of thing.
I believe we have a Sunday scheduled next week, so we'll be fine.
Yeah, and so I'll just go to or Easter's coming. I'll just go to Easter. I'm just like, and the same kind of thing at at church. You're trying to get people to go from attendees to volunteers. Yeah. Same exact kind of thing. Is moving people from that to that, because at least at our church it's the 80-20. 80% of the activities are done by 80% of the stuff is done by 20% of the people. So there's another 80% of the people that are just invisible, just show up.
Yeah, but that seems to be a pretty dependable thumb rule.
Yeah.
Anyways, so if you can get it to 75-25,
yeah,
you probably got some secret you could sell.
We were able to, like our board for the golf thing, we were able to transition some of the duties around, which was good, and the same thing with the church or the golf thing is people move. That's another thing about, more than any other place I've ever lived this is a more transitory place.
Military alone is like what?
Yeah, military or just other. Since nobody's from here, they always move back to places or stuff. Like Keith moved to Minnesota. Again, everybody's, I've been here a long time, but I've determined that's irregular. You and I have been here a long time, but that's still pretty irregular.
I'm not moving back to where I was from because they just got 24 inches of wet snow. So.
Oh yeah, well yeah, the people from the Northeast, but like the golf group, one guy moved to Arizona, another guy's moving to South Carolina. They're moving to better weather and better things. I'm like, oh, okay. But the same kind of thing is trying to attract new people each time.
All right, I'm going to wrap up the recording now.
Yep.
Yeah, you